Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you.
We're glad to be here, and we're adding grandkids by the week here because we're now up to 7.5 grandkids.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah.
very exciting.
Well, congrats. I
Thank you.
We have three little boys, and I'll tell you, their grandparents spoil them all the time. So I can only imagine 7.5. You guys
Yeah,
got a
we
full-time
we have
job.
fun.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a full-time job.
Well,
We're glad to be on the show with you.
yeah, well, it's an honor to have you guys, and I know that your book has changed so many people's lives. The fact that you've kind of filled the gap between childhood and then this thing called marriage is a huge, huge factor that so often I think marriages are set up to fail because we don't take the time to realize the impact of our childhood. And so for today's show, for our listeners, really the goal is to identify how your childhood has an effect on your marriage and what effect that has, and then how can we overcome it. Mm-hmm. And so I think just to jump right in there, I think the question that you guys ask in your book to many of your readers is this idea of can you recall a time that you were comforted as a child under a time of real distress or emotional distress? And what's the significance of that question? And what would you say to our listeners about the impact on that?
Well, it's a very diagnostic question because memories of comfort tell us a lot about a family and the degree of emotional connection that you'll find in a family. Hopefully, ideally, we would like to answer that question. Yes, I have many memories of comfort, and yet what we find is about 80% of the people we talk to really can't recall a memory where a parent didn't just acknowledge that something was going on, but they really drew out what was in that child's heart. They helped them name feelings. They helped them discover what was inside by asking good questions. And the child left that experience, or maybe the teenager, really feeling a sense of relief and a sense of being known. Mm-hmm. And many times we find that when a family can do that, it tells us that the family allows feelings, that the family is attuned to one another. They can really see into each other's souls. They're aware of each other and when stress is involved. And it tells us that there's a level of safety to open up, mm-hmm. to share vulnerable feelings, and to be deeply known.
So you're kind of painting a picture of an ideal situation. I just think about how many people I know that's not necessarily what their family growing up, childhood experience would maybe indicate. What are the effects when that doesn't? All the things that you talked about are very positive. What are the effects when these things don't go that way?
Well, when you've had this kind of an experience, then you've learned that if I'm distressed, I can come to relationship for help. Relationships are my go-to when I need something. Mm-hmm. We all ache on the inside. We all suffer under the stressful world we live in. And if we've learned that, then we've learned that I can come and get help, and I can find relief there. I can actually find comfort. And wouldn't you think when we get married and we fall in love and we think this is the person I want to be with for a lifetime, that this would be the person I could then do that with? But the contrary is actually true. If we don't have a memory of this, then we don't know how to bring ourselves into relationship, even though we're excited about our marriage and we fall in love. We don't know how to bring our stressed self or our emotionally struggling self into relationship. And so if we don't, then we've learned to go to other things for relief. And so we turn to non-relational relief for comfort. Non-relational relief looking like isolationism or being quiet or getting angry or pouting or addictions. All the different things we do to medicate ourselves or distract ourselves from this internal pain, we turn to non-relational ways for relief. So that's the significance of this question. Do you have a memory of comfort?
Because I think it's true that for all of us, we've been wounded in relationship. And whether that's happening as a child or even in the current relationship you're in, be that marriage, would you also say that we're healed in relationship? And ideally is the best connector to being healed our spouse?
Yes, absolutely. But in order for that to happen, you really have to understand what the wounds are. And we were married for 15 years with really no awareness of how our childhood experiences were impacting our adult relationships. When you grow up, whatever your family environment is so common to you that you often don't really examine what are the benefits of my home. What were the things that left me developmentally not really very adult-like? And we often don't see those things. So when I look over the history of growth between Milan and I think as we begin to identify the wounds, then we were able to really repair those by actually giving each other what we didn't get as kids.
Yeah.
Which was a safe place, an ability to feel, an ability to be comforted, an ability to have a wide range of emotions and have someone really hear you out. And these were all skills we had to learn because we didn't have them taught to us growing up.
Yeah. I think one of the things I love about your guys' book is that when you start to dabble into family of origin, it gets messy. It can get really messy, right? And yet I think you guys have been able to lay this out in a way that there's really, you've identified 5 key love styles that connect to this potentially very chaotic background.
Right.
Yet you've been able to pull that out, extract that in a way that I think gives people a real blueprint. I just want to jump right into that and maybe walk us through each of these 5 love styles. And ideally, if you have a story that can relate to that, because I think our listeners really, it's helpful when there's a story to connect it to.
Well, I do. And I would have to say the first story would be Jesus himself. Now, you said earlier, you asked, can we repair this in marriage? And we'd say, yes, definitely so. But what if you're not married? What if you're single? Jesus wasn't married, but he had a sort of little advantage. He had the heavenly the Trinity as his family of origin. So he had an advantage of closeness and intimacy. But who did he have on planet Earth? He had his disciples, and he also had Peter, James, and John, who were his closest disciples. And so he had a soulish relationship with them. So you don't have to be married to do this kind of repair work. Now, we could use him, or as Kay was discussing, if you have a memory of comfort and you've learned about relationship being a place of safety, that would be the secure connector. Those of us that did not have that kind of a relationship, we end up being insecure. And so we have the avoider, the pleaser, the vacillator, and the controller and victim, which is a part of chaotic attachment. So, Kay, why don't you talk about the avoider for a moment, since you are the recovered avoider. She's no longer an avoider. So tell us what that's about.
Well, if you grew up in a home like mine, it was probably a home where there was a lot of emphasis on mastery and performance and completing tasks and doing a good job. And I think my parents both loved my sisters and I, but they just did not know how to deal with emotions at all. So there was an underlying message. My dad got mad if I cried or if I showed vulnerable feelings and said things like, you better stop crying or I'm going to give you something to cry about. And my mom just got very anxious and flustered. Like, I don't know what to do with you when you're having emotions. So I learned to just dampen down emotions, not show them. And I got so good at it that I just stopped recognizing feelings altogether. And there's a kind of an underlying message in this home, which is kind of hurry up and grow up and be independent. And so as an adult, when an avoider gets married, they often are very independent. They're used to making their own decisions. They can function very well in the work world or when they're given a task or responsibility. But when it comes to emotions, they're lost.
Wow.
If you ask an avoider how they feel, there's only really one answer. Fine.
Right.
Always fine.
Right.
And it takes a lot of stress to make an avoider actually feel feelings. If you hook them up to a heart monitor, when they're under stress, their heart rate will increase, their stress hormones will increase, but they don't even know that. They're not even aware of it. So they look very calm, cool, and collected. But on the inside, they can be more stressed than other people might recognize, or even myself. I didn't recognize it in myself until I started to learn to have a vocabulary for feelings.
Okay. Wow.
And they're not needy, so they expect you also not to be needy.
Right.
They don't really like neediness. Neediness is kind of pathetic and, something you stay away from. And of course, life is stressful and we're very needy, dependent creatures. And so it gets you in trouble when you can't acknowledge that part of life. And
so then I was the pleaser, kid coming out of a home where I was frightened a lot. There was anger. I experienced a lot of love and care and a lot of protection, sort of helicoptery protection. But then that could change in a moment into rage, and I would be frightened. So I would alternate between these moments of feeling secure and comfortable and then frightened. And because I never knew when that switch was going to occur, I became a very anxious child. So I then was the personification of neediness because I needed a lot of reassurance. Are you okay? Is everything fine? And, why are you a bit distant? Why don't you ever quite ask me how I'm doing? And Kay's also an introvert, so if she would pull away or withdraw, that would frighten me because quietness in my home was either something that would occur before a storm or after a storm. So then I became the more anxious one who would be the pursuer. And I would be asking her all the time, how are you? Is everything okay? Do you see me? Did you, we just walked in the house. You didn't even say hi. And so those kinds of things would sort of, take me off the tracks.
Yeah.
But then that would bug her. So then that began to set up this bit of a chasing.
Okay. Wow.
Sounds pathetic, doesn't it?
Well,
it's so common though. It really
is. I think that what you're identifying in these stories of your childhood, many, many people can relate to.
Yeah.
I think
the pleaser's just the good kid. They try really hard to please everybody. They're very other focused.
Yeah.
If you ask a pleaser, where do you want to go to lunch? They say wherever you want to go.
Right.
So, they're hyper vigilant in reading the moods of other people. But, they don't really want to go deep either. They're like the avoider in that they don't want to do messy emotions. They just want to make you feel better by baking you cookies or taking you out to dinner or something on the superficial level.
So I was okay if she was okay.
So you have the avoider, the pleaser. What's
The vacillator is the third.
Okay.
And the vacillator grows up in a home where there is some connection, but it's more inconsistent. It's maybe more based on the parent's mood to sort of be in the parenting mood. And so the child experiences enough connection that they feel like, oh, I really like that. I want more of that. And yet they're made to wait until that connection is available again. And it's pretty much on the parent's terms more than it is the child's need. So this child is left in a state of conflict. I want you, but I'm mad at you for making me wait. I want you, but I don't like this feeling of abandonment. Of course, they can't name it as abandonment as a child. So a vacillator sort of deals with that pain by idealizing, and especially they idealize the future. And they grow up as the romanticizers of life. When I get married, I'm going to find the perfect person. And so dating is wonderful for the vacillator because there's a lot of time, there's a lot of attention, there's a lot of feeling of intense connection that I can feel. And that's what vacillators like. But of course, you get married and you throw a few kids and jobs in there, and the vacillator is going to have to wait. So they go from kind of an all good place when things are going well. And when they're made to wait, or they feel like you don't see me, you're not with me, that abandonment from their childhood, those feelings kick in, and usually they go from very happy to very mad and very upset in a very short amount of time. So while the avoider, go ahead.
It sounds a bit bipolar-ish.
They often get diagnosed actually as bipolar, and which is really sad. People would describe them as moody. Yeah. They would describe them as I can't please you. I never know. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells around you. And I would say the mood of the vacillator sort of governs the family. Everybody knows when the vacillator's happy, and everybody knows when they're mad. Yeah. And usually the anger is loud, and they do know what's wrong in relationships. They want more connection. They protest.
Yeah. So they pretty much control the family based on their emotional energy.
without meaning to, yes, they really do.
Yeah.
And they have a hard time recognizing that these feelings that they're getting from their spouse are actually very familiar feelings from their childhood, but they usually don't actually, none of us usually make those connections. But particularly the vacillator is highly reactive because their spouse is re-triggering old painful feelings from their childhood. And that's why they're so idealistic. If I can make my life up here an ideal, I never have to feel those feelings.
Wow.
And ideal means constant connection. There's never a break in the connection. In the attachment literature, they're called ambivalent, which means they're hot, they're cold, they're on, they're off, they're in, they're out. And these terms, and they're also called preoccupied because they're constantly reviewing in their mind what just happened back there. How come I sort of got the cold shoulder, or they said hi to this person, didn't say hi to me? They're very attentive to the averted gaze. Now, the term, in the attachment literature, the terms ambivalent or preoccupied precede by 70 years the term bipolar, which is a more recent term.
Oh, wow.
And they've been observed, this behavior has been observed since the 40s when they began observing the attachment styles of infants and 18 months old children. And so we could say, well, they sound like that, but the field of attachment and the mainstream of clinicians have not quite pulled together yet. So a lot of what we're saying here is even unfamiliar to clinicians.
Wow. This is really fascinating. So then the last one is
Chaotic.
Yeah. Okay.
So the chaotic family is the one that's fright without solutions, dangerous, where there is difficulty for the child to not be able to have any sense of organization around this theme of attachment. There's danger. There could be drug addiction. There could be abuse. There could be a place where the child has no way of predicting or understanding me and you, or self and other. I don't know how to come to you for help. If I'm distressed, I would have no illustration or example or history of finding relief in relationship. I go out and do other things to make my pain go away. I had a young guy grow up in a home like this, and he told me his dad handed him a bottle of wine when he was 14 years old and said, "Here, this will help make the pain go away." So this particular population from the chaotic, disorganized home is very much oriented toward addiction and relief through finding addictive ways to
there's
relieve
a lot
pain.
of pain in these families. In these childhood histories, I would say there's a lot of unresolved pain.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean they've gone through some very difficult experiences growing up, and they've survived those by either becoming controlling and rigid, or more victim-like and, just going under the radar and trying to roll with the punches and not protesting. And a victim in a home is sort of like another one of the kids. And the controller is generally somebody that's frightening or intimidating. And they've really lost all connection to the childhood they once had. They've survived by just saying, "Oh, that was, it was hard, but I'm done. I'm survived it. I don't look back."
Right.
And the problem with not looking back is that, it's the childhood feelings they're trying. Their whole life is designed to stay away from childhood feelings.
And their childhood feelings, which are negative, are provoked by things feeling out of control or unpredictable. Hence, they become controlling so they can predict their world and feel safe.
Yeah, controllers don't know why they need to control.
No.
Yeah. And so I'm just imagining, you guys kind of, there's somewhat of a label that's attached to this for each individual. How does that drive the connection and attraction when we start to go out and look for the person we're going to do life with? I mean, have you found that there's a connection between, if I'm from a chaotic childhood, there's a certain type of individual that I'm going to be attracted to that meets what I was lacking growing up?
Yes, if I'm from a chaotic childhood, I will look for someone that feels either controllable or who will control me or lead me and guide me. And when we're in the romance stage, it's all done in a very nice way, perhaps. I'll make all the plans for the evening. I'll make all the plans for our day off tomorrow. They just don't realize that this person, male or female, wants to make all the plans for the whole life, and they don't ever have a voice. So those kinds of things pop up, and typically what is familiar to us is what we're attracted to.
Okay.
Yeah, people marry avoiders because we're predictable. We're even. They don't realize there are no feelings there. But in the dating phase, if you've had a family that where there was a lot of upheaval or anger, an avoider can look very attractive because they're calm, they're predictable, and they're pretty even in.
Which was my case. You see, I grew up in a home where it was like this, and then here's Kay. She was like that, and so that was very attractive to me.
Right.
She felt safe.
So, as you look at these problematic love styles of their childhood, you guys talk about in the book the comfort cycle as part of the healing process. Tell us a little bit about the comfort circle.
Okay. First of all, as we think about what you just asked us also, if you put these together in combinations, you create core patterns that absolutely we can tell you what's going on if the avoider marries the pleaser, or the controller marries the victim, or the vacillator marries the avoider. All these combinations have highly predictable patterns that we can tell you before you walk into our office.
Wow.
So the universal, and it's all about reactivity, you see. We have fight, flight, or freeze, and each one of these tends to do one of those: fight, fight, or freeze. So what we found is that we can learn to grow, regulate, and as Kay would say, we will developmentally begin to make up for what was lacking or how we got harmed in our childhood by learning to do what childhood should have taught us to do, which is to first be self-aware. And self-aware means I can describe what's going on inside of me.
That's the first step of the comfort circle.
Which is the first step of the comfort circle. So in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus was said to the disciples, "My soul is distressed to the point of death. Come watch and pray with me," he was describing his inner self, and he asked for help based upon that. The second thing is speaking out and saying something to somebody.
Yeah, it's one thing for me as an avoider to start to get a list of feeling words and start to look at words that would help me describe what was inside. It was a whole nother thing to engage with him and say, "I need to tell you something."
Right.
Because my tendency was detach, solve it on my own. So the first step is awareness of myself, or maybe I look at my spouse and say, "Gosh, you're really detached today. I think something's going on," or "You're cleaning like a mad woman. That's what you do when you're stressed. I think we need to talk." So it's awareness of stress and self or other and hard feelings, difficult feelings, and then to engage with someone and say, actually, I need to tell someone, or I need to invite someone is the second step.
Okay.
And, the Bible says to speak the truth to one another, and we didn't know how to do that, Noel. We just didn't know how to accurately describe our inner self and speak to one another when we were stressed and say, "I need help," or "I think you do." Then the third thing we did not know how to do well is listen to each other, which is step 3 of the comfort circle. The Bible says, be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. But what do we all do? We're quick to anger and quick to speak. We had to learn to listen, which means I would ask her, well, tell me more about that feeling. Tell me how strong it is. What precipitated that? How long have you felt that way? Did you ever feel that way before as a little kid growing up? And the odds are, for most of us, that whatever we feel as an adult is an old familiar feeling we've felt for as long as we can remember. If we have shame today, we felt shame before. If we feel shame today, we felt fear a long time ago. It's an old familiar feeling. And so to draw that out, and then the very last part of that line of questioning would be to say, so honey, what do you need? If you're feeling this way, what do you need from me? And when I'd ask Kay that question, or she'd ask me that question early on, we'd say, I don't know. we didn't know what to do right there. So we began to then say, well, I need to think about it.
And we find that extended listening can make the difference between a reactive bad conversation and a really deep,
that's a good point,
thought-provoking conversation that actually increases self-awareness. But it's very hard to keep on listening. So on our website, howwelove.com, under freebies, there's a PDF file that you can download, and it's called A Guide for the Listener. And it has all these questions. There's about 11 questions. and see if you can sit with your spouse or someone you care about and go through all those questions without it being about you at all. It's all about the person you're listening to. No matter what they say, you make sure you got it right and you keep on listening until number 11.
Okay. So I have to clarify. So extended listening is going through those 11 questions, or is that?
Yeah, it can't. Well, that's the help we offer to people because they don't know what to ask.
Got it.
But extended listening means it's not a conversation where you say something and then I say, well, that's not right. Well, yeah, it is. That's not what happened. That's like a ping pong, match.
It could be 3 good questions, Noel. In this particular case, this shows 11 that says these help you really get through a great series of questions that help you really understand the other person. In addition, there's a soul word list on the website, howwelove.com, that would help you then be able to access the feelings you're feeling on the inside, which is critical because most of us don't have the ability to define our internal selves.
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay, the 4th point of the comfort circle is when you ask the person, what do you need? And they say, you know what, I just need reassurance that, or I just need you to own that you said you were going to be home by 5 and you were home at 8, or I need an apology, or I need a hug. Then that's point 4, which is resolution, that there's some closure to the conversation.
Yeah.
And most couples put 500 things on the table all at the same time, and they never have any closure to anyone. They just create a big mess and then walk away from it.
Yeah. I mean, there's that flooding mechanism, right, where you're backing up the truck because it's been a long time and you're dumping it all at the same time. It's a pretty ineffective strategy. So I love how you guys are saying break it down into smaller bite sizes.
One topic at a time.
Yeah. So this comfort circle, powerful. Let me just recap real quick, or could you recap just those? Is it 5 or 4 steps? 4 steps. So what are they?
Okay, so it's self-awareness or other awareness.
Right.
Engage is number 2. Number 3 is listen and find out more. And number 4 is resolve.
Okay.
Resolve means we both leave the conversation feeling like I feel better.
Yeah. And is it necessary? I'm just thinking for a couple, how do we do this on a day-to-day basis? Like a real practical, I mean, are we talking a couple hours of time or is it, more?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there were times we would do the comfort circle and yes, it would take an hour. And so we had to make time for after the kids were in bed. And, maybe we started, I think, learning to do this talking about childhood memories because it wasn't about us, which is a harder conversation. But it could take 2 minutes to say to your spouse when you come home at the end of the day, so give me 3 feelings about your day. Mm-hmm. And I would have had to use the list of soul words for a while to answer that question. But we tend to say, how are you? How are you today? Fine, stressed, that's it. And we don't really have any information about what's happening on an emotional level with our spouse when we re-engage.
Yeah, that's, I chuckle because these things are so relatable. I mean, it's not only in my own marriage, but also we work with a lot of couples and these are the things that come up so often.
And Noel, that this applies going back to the single thing that I brought up earlier. This works with friends. This works with a group of singles, a group of safe people. This works with your children. Mm-hmm. With our adolescents, when they would have some explosive thing, I'd say, well, you know what? Before you leave the house or before I drive you to the basketball game, you got to give me 3 words from the list on the refrigerator to tell me what you're really feeling here.
Yeah.
And then that would allow us to really, and they'd always say, oh, Dad, that's stupid, and all that stuff. But it would really get us down into what was happening on an internal soulish level on the inside.
Yeah.
And then it would open up great opportunities to love and care for and nurture our family members.
Yeah. So often bad behavior just means we're stressed, we're not doing well, and we don't really know how to talk about it. Mm-hmm. So we just see the outward signs that a person's really not doing well.
So if a parent only responds to the bad behavior, they're missing what's really driving the bus underneath the kid.
That's a great teaser for your guys' other book, because I'm assuming that this concept is played out similar but in a different way as you're relating it to parent-child.
That's right.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
So guess the question that comes to mind as I think about this, because this is a really powerful paradigm that you guys are shifting people towards, because we can get into the accusatory, you're the problem, you're the issue, go down the line of whatever you want to fill in the blank. The reality is that so much of this is stuff that's in the past. It's what we've brought into the relationship. So I'm just wondering, how much of this is individual healing versus couple healing that has to, really be applied to the relationship?
That's a great question. I think it's twofold. I had to own I am an avoider. I had to really say that is an injury in me. This isn't a personality. These aren't personality traits. They're injuries. I did not emotionally bond in my family growing up. And he had to own that he was a pleaser. My growth goals were to learn to come close. His were to learn to be more okay alone and more okay without pleasing someone, more okay with someone being angry. So our journey of growth or sanctification looked very different for each of us. So there is some individual work.
Yeah.
But the core pattern that they create that we were mentioning earlier, the predictable pattern when you place these styles in combination, that's a couple journey.
I see.
And, when we have to recognize and describe what is that core pattern and how do we get out of it? And we get out of it by growing as individuals and learning to go through the comfort circle. And in that comfort circle, we're really often giving each other what we didn't get as kids.
Yeah. Well, that was perfectly set up, because we won't steal the thunder, but if you want to know how to actually heal as a couple, you guys go in depth in terms of identifying the pattern of two different types of love style, and then the process of working through those issues and actually healing as a couple, which is, at the end of the day, that's what's going to save a marriage.
That's right.
It's
the
absolutely
workbook
essential.
the workbook is, I'd say, a third of the book. And so, we were thrilled when our publisher said, well, can you write a workbook? Because that's where the application is.
Right.
Insight is kind of fun. Oh, now I get it. But growth is just hard work. And we just say, pick your pain, because it's painful to be stuck in a core pattern. And it's painful to grow because you're having to go into uncharted territory. I like to say you have to break all the childhood rules to grow. They're not rules that were written on the refrigerator, but in my family, there was an unspoken rule: don't feel and don't need too much. Well, I had to break those rules in order to grow. So that's what makes it uncomfortable.
It's true. And I think the other thing is, you talk about pick your pain. I think the reality is also pick your medication to numb the pain, right? And I think when these things aren't dealt with, we end up going in that direction, which is really unhealthy behavior that can destroy a marriage at the end of the day. So
there's so many choices.
There is. And
I think we can drink, we can shop, we can use drugs, we can use pornography, we can, we can even do good things like exercise, but it can be compulsive to where you can't go a day without. And so, unfortunately, there's a lot of ways we can distract ourselves.
That's true.
So here's a headline. We were trained in our childhood to be reactive positively or negatively here. What this does is it helps us learn not to be reactive any longer so that we can learn to feel safe with each other. But those lessons were learned long ago, sometimes for many of us, forgotten. But we unlock or uncover the fact that our training took place a long time ago for our love lessons, for what we would reactively end up doing in our marriage relationship. Most people have no idea what those unseen forces are, and we just shed light on them.
So here's my final question. As a listener, I'd be asking this question: how long does this take? Is this like a couple weeks? Are we talking a couple months, couple years, or a lifetime?
Well, we say your marriage is as easy or as difficult as your childhood.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of gives you an answer. In other words, it kind of makes sense. If I came from a really difficult home, and not only did I not get any good modeling, but someone was constantly stirring and stressing and my soul on the inside, and there was no resolution for that pain, obviously I'm going to have more work to do as an adult to heal from that. So we worked very hard for 2 years. I would say they were very uncomfortable years because we were trying to do something new. But I really had no idea where God was taking us. I didn't know what it would feel like to be out of the core pattern. I didn't know what it would feel like to no longer be an avoider. And I think if I could have felt the end result, I would have been at it a lot, probably more intently and at a higher pace. But so you're not just changing your marriage, you're changing your childhood history.
You're changing decades of belief and decades of reactive behavior that, for the most part, we are just going along on a bus ride. We don't even know why those feelings are coming up. We don't know what's driving us.
Yeah.
So we're overcoming decades. So I would say 2-3 years. We worked really hard back in our late 30s, early 40s, and we've been doing it for 25, 28 years since, because we try and stay in shape by working this through, not just go on a diet once and then forget it, but it's just the same thing. We create a discipline that we've stuck with, and we check in with each other every day. How are you? How are you really doing on the inside?
Well, I think, it is hard work, but you're not only changing decades of your childhood, but you're changing, I believe, the future legacy of your family. And for those who have parents, I think that we can all relate to that, is that we don't get to pick who our parents are. We don't get to pick what home we're raised in, but we certainly get to pick the destiny of our kids and where they're going to go. Right. So I think this is powerful, powerful stuff. And again, How We Love is the book, and all the things that we've talked about in terms of PDFs, the freebies, we're going to have them linked right below this video. And I just want to say thank you to both of you for the work that you're doing. It is so needed. And I think for some of our listeners that this resonates with, is there a way because I'm just thinking a lot of this work is not just read a book. It's deeper than that. Is there a way for them to connect with you? Do you guys do counseling or?
We both do counseling full-time, and we do workshops and seminars around the United States. Okay. You can follow us at howwelove.com.
All right.
And there's also groups that can be started in your hometown, but by just going to our website and ordering one of our group curriculums that you can study howwelove.com.
Awesome. We're just coming out with a new small group curriculum for How We Love, that book we're just talking about. And so it should be on the website, I'd say, by June.
Okay.
And it's an interactive group where you watch part of the workshop on DVD, and then there's discussion and practice.
Yeah. Great. Well, again, thank you. And
you're welcome. Yeah. Thank you for having us, and thank you for the work you do, particularly with the military. We really applaud you for that, and we want to thank your military listeners for their service to our country. Mm-hmm. And we are so grateful that we get to invest in families that have a lot of stress.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stress, and even the departures and the arrivals and all that can be challenging. So we're hoping this will help.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Noel.